Tony was clearly a doctor, but was assigned to the reception desk by the department head, just because he didn't even have a bachelor's degree, immediately drawing ridicule from the nurses nearby. But Tony couldn't reveal that it was his master who placed him in the hospital. Just then, a beautiful woman walked over, and she turned out to be Tony's fiancée. Seeing him just standing at the reception desk, she didn't believe he had any medical skills, and firmly declared she would never accept an arranged marriage like this, hoping Tony would initiate the breakup. But Tony helplessly explained the engagement was arranged by his mother, and it could only be cancelled if she was found first. Suddenly, a patient in critical condition was wheeled in. As a doctor, Tony rushed forward to help with the emergency. Leaders of the hospital also arrived one after another. Tony quickly asked someone who the patient was, and learned that the old man was a decorated war hero, now tormented by illness. Tony immediately felt deep respect, and many nearby staff were praying for the veteran's survival. But just then, the doctor came out with a regretful expression, saying the patient's internal injuries were too severe to treat. Hearing this, the family collapsed in tears. As despair filled the room, Tony stepped forward, saying he had a way to save the man. The specialist scoffed at him, seeing his intern badge, accusing him of risking a national hero's life. Even the department head said Tony was overestimating himself, but Tony calmly explained he had observed just now, and determined the problem wasn't the man's age. The department head immediately told him to shut up. A professor joined in the mockery, but Tony couldn't just watch the man die. The veteran's family, hearing this, rushed over, and asked if he could really save him. Tony looked them in the eye and said, if he wanted to save someone, even the king of hell couldn't take them. The department head began to regret hiring Tony, but Tony had already shaken his hand off, and asked the family again if they wanted his help. Seeing their hesitation, he reassured them with confidence. They immediately agreed to let him try, but the department head warned him again. Tony had no choice but to say, if they didn't believe him, they could observe the procedure, and so they all entered the operating room together. The professor kept taunting Tony, but he ignored him, and directly removed the patient's clothing. The department head gasped in surprise, as Tony leaned in and studied the body carefully. Then without a word, he began channeling all his inner strength. Everyone watched in shock, as Tony began using a long-lost medical technique. He tapped various points on the patient's body, then with precision, extracted the internal hidden injury. Before they knew it, the once-dying veteran opened his eyes. Tony turned to leave, but the department head stopped him, and apologized for doubting him. The fiancé stood nearby in complete shock. As Tony stepped out of the room, the earlier specialist suddenly grabbed him, accusing him of being a disgrace to the hospital. But the patient's family intervened, declaring Tony the savior of their father. The expert was left speechless. Tony then said the man still had old injuries that needed recovery, and wrote down a prescription. The family accepted it gratefully, saying they'd help Tony with anything he ever needed. Though impressed by his skills, the fiancé still wasn't satisfied with the engagement, so she decided to test Tony's courage. She invited him to meet a rich heir for business. The heir was annoyed to see she'd brought someone along, and mocked Tony as soon as he heard the introduction. Tony didn't respond. Instead, he casually sent a wave of cold energy into the heir's body. The arrogant man immediately curled up